These testimonials are representative of my or our experiences, but the exact results and experience will be unique and individual to each person. The information provided herein is not medical advice and is not intended to substitute for the advice of your personal physician or other healthcare providers. Welcome to The Beautiful Bag. This is your host, LeeAnne Hayden, cancer survivor, and more importantly, ostomy lifer. Each and every week, I'm going to be bringing a special guest or some inspiration for you and a few little stories along the way so that you can learn what life is like for us to be living in an ostomy and why we all think it's a beautiful bag. So listen in and let's get started. Well, hello, everybody, and welcome to this week's episode of the Beautiful Bag podcast. I am your host, LeeAnne Hayden, and this week I am bringing you a guest. His name is Patrick Belton, and Patrick lives out in Alberta, Canada, also known as the Ostomy Athlete. And I'm going to tell you guys, we're going to talk about all the things that he has been doing with his ostomy that I don't know, some of you might be really afraid of, but he's been doing those things. I think it's absolutely amazing. I'll tell you, even without an ostomy, I think I'd be like, I'm not sure I can climb that kind of a mountain, but we're going to get into it. So Patrick, welcome to the show.
Yeah, thanks, LeeAnne. Hi.
Hi,
everyone.
Hi. So let's talk about this. Why don't we, we were just talking a minute ago and you're like, I don't like talking about how I got here because I live in the present. Love that. Yeah. That's amazing. However, let's do a brief journey and let the audience know how you ended up in your ostomy. And then we're going to get into all the extra beautiful fun things.
Sure. Well, basically, when I was 19 years old, I was away at university in Quebec, in southern Quebec near the Vermont border. And I started, my intestine performance just started to drop suddenly. So like a lot of things that we go through, the early symptoms. So it took 2.5 years to diagnose that. So by the time I was age 21, they finally, at first they thought it was parasites, they thought it was this, they thought it was that. Eventually they figured out I had colitis at the time. And so then I started taking, a common drug for that, Asacol or Asacol, whatever you call it. And that dealt with my symptoms really well. I made lifestyle changes and diet changes in my 20s. And so, and then it had completely gone into remission, about when I was like 28, 29 years old. And then early this century, like 2000, 2004 window, I went through some big life changes, leaving career, returning to university full time, going to grad school. I was married, had a young child, my daughter, who was 2 at the time. Marriage was ending, amicably, but the stress of all that triggered a few years later. By 2006, the Crohn's had started to creep. Colitis had started to creep up. By 2006, they diagnosed me with Crohn's. So, and then from 2006 to 2019. That's like I call it lost decade. It's really 13 years. I became very sick 2006, 7, 8. And then in 2009, I had a few intestinal surgeries that calendar year. I had another surgery in 2008. So that was when I had a J pouch installed, loop ileostomy, stoma, all that type of thing. And I made some strategic errors in my own decision-making with the surgeries in terms of removing the stoma. I made a choice to do it too early in 2009. My J pouch never worked. And that cascade led to a whole series of cascading events in 2009. Where I almost lost my life. That's a common story amongst a lot of us for different reasons, whether we end up with a stoma ostomy from cancer or from IBD. So in my case, I had a growth in my intestine at the time. It wasn't cancerous. It was going to become that. My whole large intestine, when they took it out after the surgery, they just cut the whole thing open. It was in horrific shape. So it was a good thing I had the surgery done. But that led to, up until 2018, when I finally had my stoma permanently reinstalled, my ostomy, that my health was horrific. The Crohn's just got worse. All the treatments failed. It's a common story. So a lot of us go through. You're trying to find the right way to deal with the inflammation. And so finally, at the end of the day, if you go to fast forward through all those lost years, there's no point recounting all those details. I finally, 2018, we had a Hail Mary, what I call a Hail Mary plan. So with my GI, nothing had been working at that point. We said, well, let's reinstall the stoma. Hopefully that'll stabilize my bowels. 2, we'll try a drug I hadn't tried yet, a biologic. And 3, I had to move out of the big city in the suburban area, at least spend part of the year living in a rural area or a small living center because that kind of quiets the noise around your body. And I always figured that would be a part of the formula. Long story short, that's how I ended up moving to Halifax, Nova Scotia in January 2019, because I wanted to go to a small city, like less than 500,000 people, from a metropolitan area of 8 million in Toronto, where I was living. And it all worked. Biologic worked to cause my Crohn's to go in remission. My bowels were stable from having the ostomy back. And living in that quieter environment like Halifax and then being in rural Nova Scotia, that's very calming for your nervous system. I think you can relate to this because you're out in New Hampshire. So just having that, it's like every day in Toronto, I'd walk down, there's like a million sirens, there's people everywhere. You go in the transit system, it's packed. It's just, it's a big city. So that's why I love the time I spent out here in Alberta, for instance. I'm in a town called Canmore, which is in the Rocky Mountains. So everyone knows where Banff Lake Louise is. I'm basically 21 kilometers from Banff. So you're in the mountains. It's very calm here. It's a city of like 10, 12,000 people. So it's very good for my nervous system, great for my immune system because I'm exposed to fewer people. I don't pick up colds, flus, viruses the same way. And I'm back in Toronto all the time. I go back and forth. But I have to be out here to prepare and train for the Ostomy Athlete stuff, right? Climbing the mountains and skiing to the poles and all that type of thing. I can't do it living in central or eastern Canada. There's just not the train.
Right.
So long story short, to encapsulate it, I went through hell for 10 years, like a lot of people do with our illness. But from the moment I had that surgery in 2018, it's been nothing but forward looking, trying to recover my body, and then live this adventure. Once you have your life back and the inflammation disappears largely, you have stable bowel performance, you can live a normal life, quote unquote. So that's all I'm trying to do.
Right. And you're doing an amazing job at it, because if you see, so it's permanent, right? But just what you've done over the last 5 years with creating the Ostomy Athletes, with the climbs you've done, riding your bike, being so active, skiing, all the things that you just said, you're doing a lot of wonderful things. And you said you're getting your life back. A lot of us call this, I got my second chance at life, right?
Yes.
I'm not going to waste it. And we're just not going to waste it. So let's talk about some of those things that you've been doing, and where did it come from? Where did you find the strength to do it? Was it something you did prior and wanted to bring it back, or?
Well, I will say I was born athletics. I played all kinds of sports growing up, team sports, individual sports, all that type of thing. So, and being physically active was always a part of my enjoyment of life, let's just say. It doesn't have to be formal competition, just doing whatever. So, and I was never a one sport person. I was always multi-activity person. So what happened was, when your intestinal bowel disease is so onerous, let's call it, and becomes more severe, that incapacitates your ability to do anything physical. So if that's part of where I get some of my happiness in life, then that removes that piece from you. So I was so relieved. Let's just start with 2019, that's a year after the surgery. Once I could start doing walking again and without falling, because I have blood pressure and clot issues before that, so it was not safe for my feet. And then you could do hiking and then trekking and then trail running. You gradually progress. So once you get that part of, at least for me, once I got that part of me restored, then it laid the foundation for all of these other things I'm doing now. So it's a gradual progression. Like, you can't go, look, in January 2019, I couldn't walk upstairs or downstairs, couldn't walk up any kind of an incline. And I was physically that weak. And I remember being in Halifax, Nova Scotia in February 2019, walking along the waterfront there. I'm on a boardwalk. I was at least 15 to 20 feet away from the harbor ocean water. And I was so scared of my feet that I was afraid of tripping and falling, and I'd fall and drown in the harbor. Like, that's how paranoid I'd become, because my body was that incapacitated. So those types of things, I think any of us have self-pride in terms of what we're doing. That drove me to not just get my fitness back, but start pushing the boundaries of what my body could do. And what I realized is, at the time, there's a psychological component to all these surgeries we go through in illness. As you start to doubt yourself, you doubt your body, what you can do physically. I'm talking even walking to the shopping mall. It can be something really simple. So I wanted to get that. I wanted to see what my body could still do after these 13 years of severe illness, and push the limits physically of what I could do. And what I ended up realizing in that journey from 2019 to present day, because I spent a year living out in British Columbia, so I could do mountaineering a few days a week there. So during the pandemic, I was there in 2021. I realized it was in my head. What was keeping me back physically was the fear, and I had become timid from the surgeries, timid about my body. So I realized that once I figured that out, my stoma and ostomy weren't holding me back. You get a good appliance in your body for the particular activity and that combination, you're good to go. So I realized no matter how hard, I realized I could keep pushing my body physically. And I'm talking to extremes here too, by the way, not just heart rate, but like the agility of what you got to do in mountaineering and the positions you put your body in, and especially at higher elevation, that there was no, my body wasn't affecting me anymore. It was still my head. So every time literally I go in the mountains to this day, it's like it's a psychological hurdle I'm always trying to go through to push myself through. Does that, if that makes sense?
It totally makes sense. So
Yeah.
because and anybody can apply this, not just from mountaineering, but going to the
No.
store, walking out their door, whatever it is, that mental thing that can
Yeah.
stop you from doing a lot of things. So what do you do to prepare
Well,
yourself mentally, or when you realize you're doing this?
yeah. So, and just to, so let me answer you this way. It just touches on what you just said is I think back in 2018 to 2009. So that period of time, there was massive chunks of elongated months within there of each of those years where I was so scared to get out of my bed. It took all my willpower, psychological, emotional, physical willpower to get out of bed or couch to get to the bathroom. And often I'd have to crawl because I was so enfeebled and so weak. Like it was that bad, right? So you become fearful. I would be scared trying to get to the toilet because and even when I was crawling, I was afraid of falling on the floor and smashing my head. So I was that paranoid. So I had that inbred fear from that. Now, pushing through that barrier is not so easy because that's accumulated over 10 years. That fear builds up. And what I found was, just to tie this back to answer your question, in 2009, when I had my January 30th, 2009 is when I had my large colon removed in Toronto at St. Mike's Hospital. And my nervous system's never been the same since. Obviously, my immune system has never been the same. It's permanently impacted immune system. We would make a weaker immune system for life from that. But my nervous system, and my surgeon warned me it would be heavily impacted. I underestimated the degree to which it would be a lifetime impact. But part of that nervous system impact is that's directly affecting the wiring in your brain. You're not just your self-perception of yourself, but how you interact with the world, how you interact with people, everything about it. And then the other thing I just want to add is when I had that surgery, I was discharged like 7 days after my surgery, the original January 30th large colon removal surgery. So on the 9th day post-op, I remember I did a post on this on my site, like a little 4-minute video. I remember I knew myself well enough not to look in the mirror for 3 months after surgery. I didn't want to see what my body looked like. I didn't, not the stoma. It's just because you're swollen and all those, you've cuts everywhere and all that, scars and stuff like that. But I accidentally, on the 9th day post-op, I'm walking to the washroom or trying to walk to the washroom, and I accidentally looked in the mirror. It was off in the distance, and I just thought to my head, oh no, I've done it. And I was in shock at what I saw. I looked like I was 8 months pregnant. I had 7 appendages, like wires and stuff still sticking out of my body because I just come out of the hospital. I still had epidural needle in my back, all this stuff. And I had blood all over the place. I was leaking blood. And I looked like, and I couldn't see my feet. I looked down, I can't see my feet because my stomach's so swollen. And then my face everything was swollen. And then, and my legs were puffed out. It turned out I had blood clots. I had to go in that night, emergency, and they gave me like 24 hours to live that night because my lungs were full of clots. The discharge doctor had missed the symptoms. Anyways, so but I remember looking in that mirror, I was in such shock and horror of what I saw. And I also had positive body health, self-esteem. I wasn't arrogant. I was okay with who I was from a child. And then I look at this person, I go, I'm ugly. Like I really thought that. And from that moment on, I lost my whole sense of masculinity. I didn't feel masculine anymore. And I've noticed online talking to people all over the world is that whether you're female or male, sometimes post-op, you feel less feminine, you feel less masculine. And part of the recovery is recovering your sense of femininity or masculinity. In my case, I couldn't do that until 2019. So, but the moment I was on this mission in 2019 to recover feeling more like a man, a male, not feel masculine again, I do that through sport, through physical activity. So the whole journey of me in the outdoors, this is called, generally speaking, is to recover my sense of masculinity, also recover my sense of physical strength, also to calm my nervous system, all those types of things, right? And being in nature, I find that my immune system's stronger. It's not just the fitness part, it's the psychological, emotional component of what you see behind me. Like the fact that I come out here in the morning, my first sight is a mountain. If I look at the mountain over there, then I see the morning sunrise coming up over it. Like that stuff is priceless. I can't get that living full time in a suburban or urban environment. Right. So anyway, I mean, I'm giving you a elongated kind of overview answer, but it kind of ties into what you're doing. So do you want to rephrase the question? Because I can answer it specifically now.
Yeah, no,
I was kind of going on a tangent.
No, I love the tangent because it's you said so much there that really makes you think, because typically I talk to a lot of women, right, on this podcast.
Right. Yes.
A lot of women, and it's us and our body images and being in a bikini and feeling feminine and doing that stuff. And we need to understand, men go through this psychological thing of your masculinity, of
yes,
who you are as a man. You guys don't talk it out. Like
no, we don't.
We're gonna be like, oh, to each other until we connect all the crosses around, right? All that. So we'll talk it out. You guys don't. So how is you as a man? So you had said a few things. You as a man, you got out in nature. You started to push your limits. You started to do things to feel masculinity again. So the question is, like, what is it specifically that you do? Like when you know you're going to go climb a mountain, or when you know the voices in your head are going to start to try and stop you, what are some of the processes of the things that you do to get yourself to the point to do it?
Yeah, it's a real psychological barrier each time like what I call it's a trigger. Like let me give you this. One of the outcomes of the surgery was I became claustrophobic, really small spaces. So as an example, or on the mount, I became fearful of elevation and heights. And here I am doing these mountains, which is kind of crazy because you're completely exposed at times where I mean, like I was doing a traverse in I was doing on Cotopaxi in Ecuador last year. I was doing this like kilometer-long traverse, and I don't know what angle it was at. It's probably an 80-degree steep pitch, and we were breaking the ground. So and you were on a glacier, so the footpath was the width of your foot, and we're creating as we go. I'm roped into another guy, a 4-foot rope. I have an ice axe and crampons, the only thing keeping me on the mountain. And then my fear has always been this surgery impact of, what if I become fearful of the height and the exposure at that moment? So now, in that case, when I first started it, I looked at this traverse and I went, oh my God. And the fear gripped me momentarily. And I yelled out to my guide who was roped up in front of me. I said, just stop a second. I turned around and looked the other way in the mountain and just collected myself, really. It's a mental discipline. Collect myself in the moment, realize how fortunate I was to be standing where I was. Like literally, that's what I did. I thought, I'm so blessed to be standing right here, right now. And I thought back of the different surgeries I had and being in hospital, how our weight goes down to, and I thought, oh my God, look where I am. I'm on a volcano, a live volcano. To boot, the gases were coming out of the thing. And I thought, I'm just a kid from suburban Toronto and Canada. And here I am staying in a volcano in Ecuador, a country I normally would never have traveled to. I always think, oh, I'll just drive to, fly to Paris or England or London. And here I am. And I thought, this is so exotic. I said, get your together, Patty, turn around. And I turned around and I was fine. So like, it was really that simple. But in terms of pushing myself through, like I was on the mountain, just a couple mountains on the weekend, and I was going up to one, just the mountain beside where I live here. And there's a part just where you're exposed up on the ridge. And there's a lot of snow that's come here recently, above 2,000 meters. So I had put my crampons on, so I had good grip and all that kind of stuff. But still, I was very exposed. It was only about maybe 6 inches wide where I was walking. And then it drops off in both places. Like it's a drop down left to right. Now, I put myself in that position to train my brain to exposure. So basically, a short answer to what you're asking is confront the fear. Is literally what I've done post-op since that surgery in 2018. Every fear I have physically, whatever it is, confront it and keep pushing it. So with the mountaineering stuff, every mountain I go to every weekend, I'm challenging that where I'm timid or how I'm fearful. That makes sense. And I keep pushing the boundary. So since 2019, it's been gradual. So if I give me an example, when I moved to Nova Scotia in 2019, I remember it was April 2019. And I met somebody there who became a friend. They drove me to Pennant Point Trail, which is like a 10K ocean coastal trail. And there's this beautiful crescent beach, that white sand crescent beach there called Crystal Crescent Beach. So we parked in the parking lot. We walked 400 meters to get to the trailhead, and I was already gassed. When I say I was gassed, I was gassed. My cardio was that bad because I was still a year and 2 months into my recovery, but I was really messed up in the blood clots and other things. My recovery took 3 years. So what I realized when we got halfway, so we got like 4K into this hike. I barely made it back to the car. I was that weak and enfeebled, but I was also scared because we're walking along the ocean coastal trail and it's all these rocks, like these big, huge rocks, and the waves are crashing in. And I remember just being scared. Well, what if I slip and fall? Because you could actually do that there. So my point is, I realized then I have to keep confronting my fear. The same thing with the claustrophobia or whatever it might be. You just have to confront it. So test it. And then, so each day what I do when I go into nature is I'd go a little bit further. And so on a mountain, a little bit more exposed, a little bit steeper, each outing. And sometimes I got scared. Like when I went to BC, I was living there, a mountain will defeat me, quote unquote, sometimes. I'd get too scared on it. That's okay, because it's there. I can come back the next day or the next week. So I would come back the next week determined I'm not going to back down at that point of exposure where I'm standing. Sometimes there's a path around a rocky oak cliff, and it might be this wide. There's no other way. You have to go that way. So if you slip, you're thinking in your head, well, if you slip, that's it for you, right? So you have to get past that. So the point is, I just keep confronting it. Mm-hmm. That's all I do. I mean, and not accepting failure or not accepting defeat. And so I use the mountains to all the negative outcomes of our surgery and our intestinal disease or cancer, whatever the case may be. I simply use outdoor nature, not just the mountains, anything outdoors, to push the damage that causes back. So the psychological barriers, I keep beating those back. And that, of course, strengthens you emotionally and obviously physically. The physical benefits are amazing. Right? Mm-hmm. So, and just your intestinal performance coming out of this stuff. So I think, did I answer that?
You did. You did. Sure. No, you did. Yeah, no, you definitely did. And you said something too in there that, yes, you're pushing yourself. Yes, you're realizing that you're feeling this way. You give yourself a minute to collect yourself and then you say, okay, and push yourself. But at the same time, you also said sometimes the mountain wins, right? And you don't take that as a failure. You give yourself grace. No. Say not today, but maybe next week or the week after or the month after, whenever it is. But you give yourself that grace as well to be able to protect yourself, right? To then allow yourself to go try it again because you're not done. You're not going to not go back and do it. Nope. So no, right? And I think that is a lesson. Listen, you climb ostomy or no ostomy, you're not finding me hanging off a mountain. I'm not that kind of girl, right? However, I mean, I have gone hiking and things like that, but that is something that is amazing that you've taken in, and you're teaching people, you're telling people what you're doing to climb the mountain, but you're also teaching people what it takes to get that fear, to like face your fear. Like you're afraid to get out of bed, take a step, right? You're afraid to walk out the door, take a step. Like those little tiny things will multiply and multiply and multiply. And that's exactly what you just said.
If you tie it back, if I go back to May 2018 as one example, I remember I had no support in terms of anybody living with me. So I was living alone, recovering from that last, when I had the ileostomy reinstalled. So it's like 3 months or 2.5 months after the surgery. I remember lying in bed and it was actually dangerous for me to walk to the bathroom. And I wasn't physically capable at that point still. But I remember lying in bed, having to overcome, you have to get a grip on it. So the point is the situations of getting the mountain are no different than me lying in that bed in 2018 post-op. The fear of just trying to get to the washroom safely, the physical will and emotional power it took to get me there. It's the same thing I deal with in the mountains. And when I'm in the mountains now, I think back to those types of incidents in 2018, 2019, 2016, 2014, all that stuff, 2009. You just think back and go, look how far I've come. And that helps me convert it to what I'm doing now, which I guess I know it's extreme, right? But that's part of the whole Ostomy Athlete thing. Myself and our teammates, Charlotte, Jessica, Rob, is to push our physical boundaries and to set an example where, like Rob Hill, he lives in BC, so he's on our team climbing too. And he's already climbed the 7 summits with Crohn's disease and with an ostomy, by the way. He's the only guy in the world to ever have done that, male or female, with our body type. But he also says everyone has their own, with our illness and our surgeries, we all have our own Mount Everest to climb. Literally, and that's true. Like, so maybe at one point for you or for me, our Mount Everest was to physically get ourselves out of bed and somehow make that journey to the kitchen, to the fridge, or to the bathroom. It's the same thing, same psychological, emotional, physical output. So I'm hoping that if people see us doing some of these mountains and other things that we're doing in epic, majestic nature, like I like to say, they go, well, if she or he, if Charlotte, Jess, or Rob, or Patrick have gone through this physical stuff, well, maybe I should challenge myself a little bit more and push myself and realize, oh, I'm placing too many psychological limits on myself. This is assuming that you've got some degree of bowel stability and some degree of inflammation, let's call it stability, or cancer stability, right? You need the two things playing out. So anyway, yeah.
Yeah, no, it's amazing. So, you started bringing up your teammates. Let's talk. When did you decide to put all of that together?
Yeah. So look, when I went through the illness journey, 06 to 2019, is part of what was frustrating me is I wanted to somehow help the community or give back to the community. And my life, like I was too ill to do it. I couldn't manage that. So I promised myself that made a commitment to myself that once I got health stability, I'd start trying to do something in some fashion to benefit the community. I didn't know what that would look like. When I was in Nova Scotia, it was in the summer of 2019, 2020, both those summers, I was running, actually I was hiking a trail, and then an ultra marathon runner passed me the opposite direction. And I just stopped her for a sec. It was a woman. And I asked her about, actually I was asking about the shoes she's wearing and talking to her about the ultras. And I saw her running. I thought, God, I'm fit enough now. I can do that. So then I ran the last 8K of this thing. So I actually ran the trail. So that was a breakthrough for me. So what happened was when I started running that, I thought, darn, there's an opportunity. I was thinking just where I was a year and a half, 2 years ago, physically was, and the 5 years before, and the 8 years before. I thought there's an example here to be set. And then I realized, and then I thought, okay, what am I going to call this thing? And I thought, okay, well, I have an ostomy and athletic. Let's call it the Ostomy Athlete. And I thought that was a kind of a good flag name for it. And then during this run, the trail run and hike, there's a combo. I thought, I got to find other people like me around the world who want to do some of this epic outdoor nature stuff, which includes some ultra marathons and some other things. But it also was going to focus on mountaineering, which ties back to my childhood. And I can get into that in a sec. But it was literally born in that trail run. It was a perfect summer day. I remember the waves were crashing in. I could see seals playing. The sun was refracting off, like the ocean looked like crystals. It was one of those days. And so the whole idea came then. And then now I was still not fully recovered then, but that's when I started researching more online, looking for people like me online, through Instagram, Google, any means you can think of. And then one thing I learned was that women are leading the charge in our communities of IBD and ostomy. They're, like you already hearkened to, they are clearly the most vocal. They're the most brave and courageous at exposing themselves to, online in different ways, psychologically, emotionally, and physically, and all this type of thing, and kind of pushing the conversation. So my lessons I took really largely from learning through other women online. That female could be 15, could be 70, everything in between. So it was actually women online indirectly challenging me, saying, I got to put myself out there more than I'm doing. I have to be more open than I'm doing, and all that type of thing, both personal life, public life, in any way. So that led to that. And then so I just started looking. Look, at the end of the day, my teammates, I found them all through Instagram or TikTok, or Rob Hill I found through a BBC News article, for goodness sake, and he's in Canada. He'd done an interview there. So and then I just started contacting people. I've only found like 9 people so far in the world. And I spent like a year and a half looking. I still look even today. So it's like 3.5 years on, looking for people with IBD and an ostomy who can do mountaineering. And I've only found 9 people, male or female. So, and 4 of us we've linked together because we figure there's a more powerful conversation that we can push by joining forces than if we're just operating individually. So both in terms of awareness, all that type of thing, both in terms of any charitable funds we try to do, and simply, look, the cost of doing the mountaineering, like to climb the 7 summits and ski the North and South Pole, I mean, that's like, for 4 of us, it's like $2.5 million US. It's not cheap. So we have to get sponsors. It's not like we're individually wealthy. Like if you do high altitude mountaineering, you're either wealthy or you've got corporate sponsors. So I've been focused on trying to get sponsors lined up for us to fund our expeditions so we can go do this. so that kind of led to all, and so look, at the end of the day, I found them because I was searching for them. That's how we discovered each other. And it's great that we're gender balanced and we cover different ages, basically from like 30s to 50s. So there's different conversations you can have within the mix of what we do. We each have our own way of communicating. And there, I have to say this, like, I'm totally in awe of those guys. Like, if I look at what Charlotte lives in Alaska now, but she's an occupational therapist working with people who have an ostomy. Like, she helps their physical recovery, and she's got Crohn's and an ostomy herself. So, and then Jessica in England, she's a dietitian, nutritionist, right, working with people with our bodies, and she has Crohn's. She had cancer in her rectal cancer, and she's got an ostomy. And then Rob's got ostomy and Crohn's, and he's already climbed the biggest mountains in the world, or a lot of them, I should say. So they're all extraordinary in their own way, and in the conversations they can have, like, I mean, they're just extraordinary. Like, I'm in awe of what they do, and the two careers, say, of Jessica and Charlotte, being able to work in the healthcare system, having our bodies, the way they're able to give to a patient and help a patient navigate, that's extraordinary, because it's not just their learned knowledge, it's their own informed knowledge from their own life experience with the disease, with the surgery outcomes and all that. So I'm just in awe of what they can do. So I'm really blessed to have them kind of in my circle. It's unfortunate we live so far apart. It'd be great if we all lived in the same geographic area. So it is what it is. But having us in the three countries, United Kingdom, United States, and Canada covered off, is actually really good. It'll make it easier for getting sponsorships. It's also easier for creating awareness and things like that in terms of what I call Joe Q public, right? Yep. You know, getting we'll be able to do more collectively in numbers. And it's just taking some time to ramp it up because they all have their own careers. And so I've been gradually trying to do some of the organizing in the background to get us. And yeah, so.
No, that's fantastic. And, you know, even being together, we just had in the US, there was the United Ostomy Association of America conference in Atlanta, and just walking in there and being able to be surrounded by other people in an ostomy, there was so much to be said about that, right? To have people, to collective, right? For everybody to get together, to throw ideas off each other, to support each other. And I'm around ostomies a lot because one, because of the podcast, two, I travel and I just kind of, it's just worked, you know, and I work with, well, I'm an ambassador for Hollister. So it kind of just all works together really well. And it's amazing what you guys are doing for yourselves. And like you said, you know, the two women, you know, what they're doing in the healthcare, you know, your buddy who's already 7 summits, what you're doing out there in the world as well. And so, you know, and I don't want this to go without saying, like, if there's somebody listening here and they're like, I want to get involved. I'm a mountaineer. I'm an extreme sports person. I want to be a piece of this. How do they get in touch with you for all of that?
Yeah, just email me. Like, we have a website, theostomyathlete.com, and it's very detailed. I keep adding content to it every week. So there's not just bios, there's a lot of videos, everything, but my email's there. So they just go there. They can find me on Instagram, TikTok, but it's probably just best to email me privately. Email me there and link up. We already have people doing that. Like, I know Rob was messaged by somebody in Sweden, Stefan. He's actually a musician. He's got our body. And so he's been messaging me too. He's going to climb Aconcagua November 29th with a Swedish climbing group. That's his first big mountain he's doing. So we do have some people reaching out to us. Another gentleman in Philadelphia who doesn't do mountaineering is thinking of getting into it. So we do have some people reaching out to us around the world, sometimes just asking for advice. Like, I had so it's usually by email, right? Because the email is quite public. It is on TikTok, and it's better than messaging, I think, through, it's just a bit more privacy with it, right? Digital privacy. So they can reach us there. It's pretty easy to find me that way because I'm on all the different social media platforms with my email. I think my phone number is on a lot of them as well, too. So, yeah. It's going to be, like, I'll say this, part of what we're doing is when I talk to not just the others, my teammates, but you talk to people in our community, I think a lot of us have gone through this, is that what would frustrate me when I'm trying to do post 2019 publicly outside of our community is I used to get frustrated by people saying, oh, do you have cancer? And well, if at the moment I didn't, I say, no, I got Crohn's disease. Oh, yes, okay, it's no big deal. Or people would minimize what Crohn's is. They think it's like a cold or flu. And I remember people saying to my daughter, like 15 years ago, you know, oh, your dad's not that sick, he's got Crohn's, you know, or he's just exaggerating what symptoms are, things like this, or people might think you're lazy or you don't want to work. When you get really sick, it's complete incapacitates you, things like that, right? Um, and it's worse if you're a single parent because you don't have anybody to fall back on. You have a whole household of people, So that type of stuff, you can have people in your circle, they just don't understand it, or it's the usual crap. Change your diet, or here, take this vitamin pill, or there's no magic solutions for it. People don't seem to realize when you see Crohn's disease that it is a disease. I don't know if people with Parkinson's or MS or whatever get the same kind of thing.
Yeah.
But yeah, so the only way to deal with that is to go public, and then in the whole mountaineering thing and Ostomy Athlete thing is at the end of the day, I figured, okay, if there's that level of ignorance in the population and society in general, let's set more extreme boundaries for what we're trying to do physically, because that's going to garner a lot more attention, eyeballs on it. And we can force we cannot just challenge people within our community of IBD and ostomy, but we can push things more publicly. And look, if I look at organizations like in Canada, I'm Canadian, so Crohn's and Colitis Canada, US, there's the Crohn's and Colitis Foundation, equivalent in the UK, these are the Ostomy Canada Society, things like that. They do okay. But I always look at, like, to be blunt, in Canada, I look, they do a lame walk. How many charities do a walk? And I'm thinking, well, can't we do something sexier and push the boundaries?
Like hang on a mountain.
yeah, like and just maybe it's just. But so part of my thinking too is if we can push, and also it's part of it's just interest too. Like let me ask. I would say this, and maybe even flip a question back at you. One thing I had a curiosity about after my last major intestine surgery in 2018 was, once I had body stability, I knew I could live life again, as in writ large. I could truly live life again, have a career and all that stuff again. I had a curiosity, what's left in my body? What can it still give me physically to do? So my first goal was walk to the bathroom. My next goal was to be able to literally walk 100 meters outdoors, then be able to go to the supermarket and shop without a friend keeping me safe by walking with me or driving me there. So I had a whole series of progressions, and that's, anybody like us can relate to those. It's just where I'm finishing my progression is trying to climb, well, what will end up being the tallest mountain in the world, which is Everest. And that's not even the hardest thing we're going to do. The hardest thing we're going to do is ski the South Pole and the North Pole. The South Pole ski is like 1,138 kilometers, 50 to 60 days. The North Pole skis, well, it depends because of the earth warming. It's really changing the route finding, but the Arctic ski up in the North Pole is going to be the worst. That's probably around 540 kilometers, but the rate of ice melt and glacier melt is so dramatic. I don't even know what route we can take that's safe. Anyway, the point being is, at the end of the day, part of me is my curiosity is to see what my body can do. And what people need to realize with the stoma, and I understand the psychology of this. When I first had it in 2009, I got to tell you this quickly though. In 2009, you would believe the stupid decision I made. So January 30th, I have my large colon removed. I had the loop ileostomy put on. It was classified as temporary at that point. 12 weeks later, I chose to have my surgeon remove the stoma so my J pouch would function. 12 weeks after, on my birthday, May 5th, 2009. The reason why I did it is because I had to go to a business trip to Malta, and I was going to be on the beach for a week. A bunch of other executives in the industry I was working in Canada. I thought, I don't want to be seen on the beach with my stoma. And I'm thinking I got to wear these like quirky high-waisted bathing suits, that go like basically up to your navel. You see some men wearing those with their socks. I thought I was so vain. And the thing is, so I had that surgery May 5th, 2009 to remove the stoma. And then my first night I had like 44 bowel movements, I remember, because they wanted me to record it. Then it went to 60. And then for weeks afterwards, I was doing over 100 either false movements or bowel movements a day. And that's where I almost died. My weight dropped to like 105 pounds at that point, all that kind of stuff, 106 pounds, whatever it was. Stupid decision. And I didn't accept my ostomy then, but it was only temporary. So there came a point though, by 2018, where I knew I needed my ostomy to have bowel stability, intestinal bowel performance, like kind of regulated properly. So I was thankful and happy I got it. So there's been acceptance ever since. And I can't, the truth is what I'm doing today, not just the mountaineering, anything I do, even riding a bike or speed skating or whatever it is. Because after my surgery in 2018, I took up speed skating, trekking, hiking, trail running, mountaineering, ocean kayaking. I'm missing stuff. Oh, skiing, different forms of skiing. I started all this stuff afterwards. I couldn't do that stuff for 13 years. So the quality of my life. So what I'm able to do is I just keep exploring what my body can do with an ostomy, and the ostomy doesn't impede any of it. So, and that's led to, so, I'm just like, at the end of the day, I have so much gratitude and thankfulness I'm able to do this and live an adventure. I mean, think how cool it is. And I can't wait till 2024. My teammates will get on some mountain somewhere. It'll probably be Kilimanjaro first, I suspect, in terms of the 7 summits. And the reason why we're doing the 7 summits thing is because there's cachet to it, right? It's the 7 tallest mountains on the 7 continents. It's simply a list. But the truth is, we're going to do other things in between. That's why I keep going to Ecuador. I was just there recently. I did Cayambe, a beautiful mountain. Oh my God. But just under 5,800 meters, 19,000 feet. And the glaciers on there are so stunning. Like, we see these ice and snow form. I know ice and snow is not for everybody, but the glaciers are so beautiful. Oh my God.
I can imagine how beautiful that, I mean, I can just picture how beautiful that is. I was in Nicaragua and just going over the volcanoes. It's all jungle and whatnot, right? It's not glaciers and stuff, but it was just jungle. And it was a beautiful thing to see and go through. But no, go ahead.
And we have to go, actually, I'm not looking forward to doing this one, but the last 7 summit that I know I'm going to do of those mountains is the Carstensz Pyramid in Indonesia. And that's all rock climbing, but we have to go through the jungle to get there. It's actually, the jungle is more dangerous than the mountain, to be honest, because there's some uncontacted tribes there that will attack you as you're going through. So you have to go through with armed guards. Some people helicopter in over it now, but anyway. So that's the last one of the 7 I'm going to to do.
Okay. I can't wait to follow this one.
Yeah. But the thing, let me just make one comment too, because Rob, I mean, what's kind of cool about this, but also bizarre, is that the only person in the world I've been able to call, to contact, to talk about mountaineering, like high altitude stuff, is Rob Hill in British Columbia, Canada. Because he's the only one who's done these big mountains with our body. There's literally no one. I can't go to a nutritionist or a stoma nurse or a doctor. They have no idea how our bodies work there. Like, I asked Rob, how did you empty your bag at 8,000? Like, you're 500 meters below the Everest summit. Your bag fills. What do? There's 100-kilometer winds. It's minus 40. You're on a, like, what do? Like, stuff like that. There's no one else. You think of these situations. What if your appliance what if you have to change your appliance and you're on Denali in Alaska? You're at high camp. It's freezing. Like, basic stuff like this. Think about it. And then how do you, if you're in minus 40 or minus 50 Celsius temperatures with high winds, how do you put on a frozen appliance on your skin if you've developed a leak? Like, this basic things like this, like, or even here, like when I'm in Canada, like, I think I'm in the Rocky Mountains or the coastal mountains, like, there's grizzly bears and mountain lions. And I'm thinking, what if I get a leak? I got to change my appliance in the middle of here and a bear shows up, like, stuff like this, right? There's some practical considerations here. The one thing I got to comment on, though, and to harp home, is once you have IBD, once you have an ostomy, in our day-to-day civilian life, I like to call it, for you and I, we have issues with hydration permanently for the rest of our life, right? And potassium, electrolytes, and creatinine, and B12, and all those things. That's exacerbated high altitude. So the one thing when I talk to Rob is our rate of the higher elevation you go, the lower the oxygen environment on a mountain. For anybody of any body type, your body dehydrates faster. And you lose the ability to consume fluids as you increase your elevation. So once you get in the death zone, like roughly just say above 7,000 meters, your body, you can't really eat or drink anymore. So there's 2 things that happen in elevation. One, for anybody, not just ours, for anybody's body, you dehydrate faster, you burn calories more. So when I'm doing mountaineering, I burn 10,000 calories a day. That's a lot. How do I replace those? Now, if you're doing a 6 weeks expedition on Everest, you burn 10,000 calories a day, and you'll burn 8 to 10,000 at rest without even doing physical exercise, just because of the low oxygen environment. Then you factor in the rate of dehydration. Look, I go in hospital. I call it pit stops, right? I go in hospital here in Canada 2 or 3 times a year because I become so badly dehydrated. I have to go get admitted for a few days, get bags of fluid, B12 pumped in, potassium, all that kind of stuff. And
Mhm.
it's like a car filling up with gas. Leave after a few days and you're good to go.
Right,
Well,
right.
the problem with we're confronting the mountain is we actually have a real issue with this. So physically, that's why there's Rob's the only one who's ever done this. And I see this now. I've gone up to like 6,300 meters, basically like 20, it being as high as 22,000 feet, 21,000 feet in a mountain. So you're losing weight faster, you're dehydrating faster, and accommodating this with our body is dangerous, right? So getting to the summit of a mountain is one thing, but you have to safely get down, knowing with our body, if it's like a 3 or 4 week expedition or something, you're draining weight that whole time. So you and I are experienced at weight loss. We've had to go through that in our normal life. But when you're in a dangerous physical situation, elevation, you have to get down safely in a low oxygen environment. You're really enfeebled. It's a high demand physical activity. It's not so easy. So accommodating our body in this type of activity, I also have a kind of like a scientific curiosity, almost seeing how we manage that. So even when I'm going to Ecuador, do these 6 kilometer peaks down there, that's part of what I'm doing is I'm poking and prodding to see how long can I go without eating, how long can I go without drinking. Like I did one mountain down there. It was a 5,000 meter mountain last year beside Chimborazo, which is the biggest mountain in Ecuador. So this is and I purposely started the mountain out without eating or drinking for 29 hours before. I was testing myself. So
Okay.
for 29, and I had no sleep. And then I had to go out for a 10-hour hike and then climb on a glacier to this 5,000 meter mountain. And then I had to get back. No eating, no drinking. And I started for 29 hours of no eating, no drinking before I even started. And then another 10 hours of that high physical output to test myself psychologically to push through the barrier. And then there's an emotional thing. And you become very emotional when you're in that kind of degree of suffering. But the thing about you and I and other people in our community is because of the chronic illness and then the surgeries, we become experts in what I call endurance suffering. That's a skill set you develop over many years. We can apply that in different facets of our life afterwards. It could be work, it could be family. There's different ways you can take that skill set of endurance suffering and apply it. Part of what I do and our teammates is we're applying it in the physical activities we do in some of these big mountains or other things we might be doing, right? There's one difference though, is that if I'm going up a mountain, I'm choosing to suffer. The endurance stuff I'm going through, I have to choose to embrace it. Whereas with our illness and surgeries, it's being thrown at us. You just got to endure. It's not that you wanted it. So, so there is one twist on the psychology of it. That's a barrier I have to confront every time. Like, look, every mountain I do, even local here, the first half hour I want to give up.
Right. I remember I climbed a mountain. This was I had cancer, but I didn't realize I had it. And we were climbing out in Vail, Colorado.
Oh, yes.
And
Yeah,
so
yeah.
we were starting to get the elevation, and it was literally the first part of it was just all incline. Like it didn't even start like a soft thing. It was just complete climbing up. And so we're doing this hike and I'm walking up. I'm like, why am I doing this? My whole head, why am I doing this? Why am I walking up this thing? Like, there's no reason for it. And it was like the elevation was getting higher and higher. And I was like starting to try and catch my breath. And I'm like, what is happening? Why am I doing this?
Yeah.
And again, it was that mental, and that was prior to having my ostomy.
Yes. Yeah.
Well,
by the way, no, I tell you just a quick anecdote. When I was just in Ecuador doing Mount Cayambe recently, so 5,790 meters, just under 19,000 feet. I had I planned this with Rob before I went up, but I'm trying to carry less fluid. I'm always I'm paranoid about getting dehydrated, right? Like I think we all are. Yeah. And then so I usually carry double the fluid I need on a mountain, but it means I'm carrying a lot more weight. And then anyway, long story short, 2 hour. This was supposed to be an 8-hour climb night for the summit push. 2 hours in, I'd already consumed 1.7 liters. I had 2 metal canisters. That left me with a 1.5 liter bladder, they carry a little knapsack. It broke. Jeez. So I had another 6 hours to go to get the summit and get back down. And you're dehydrating at a really rapid rate. Your heart rate's up because you're at elevation and the air's thin, all that type of stuff. And then I suffered like, that was horrific. It was like being back in the hospital again, getting up and down. So I'll never carry a bladder again anymore. I'm just going to carry the extra weight to get us through this lesson learned. But why was I telling you this story? Basically, the quitting. I got to the 2-hour thing. I knew what I was going to have to go through, the health, physically and emotionally, psychologically. I wanted to give up. for the first 3 hours after that bladder broke. It was that painful. But then there was a point on the mountain where I turned. The sun was just, because you start climbing around midnight, so you're climbing in the dark. So when the sun started to come up, I could just see the shadow of the light cresting over the mountain and this stunning, huge, cavernous crevasse of the glacier, like this massive crevasse. I thought, oh, that's why I'm doing it. And then the psychology changed after that. And then the suffering, let's call it, became easy. Mm-hmm. So, and then because the beauty overwhelms you. And then I realized how privileged I was. And I started thinking of people online, like all the people that you and I see on TikTok and Instagram and YouTube and Facebook who have IBD and ostomy. I literally on that mountain started thinking, they just randomly, they pop into my head. Oh, this person's going through this right now. Well, I was there 6 years ago. Like they're in that stuff, I call it the sausage grinder of those bad illness years. And I thought, look at where I am. Oh my God. And that just changes the thinking right away. So different people, literally in the moment on the mountain, when I hit that give up spot, that point where I want to give up, I actually end up, I'm not trying to think what this person and that person like, they just pop into my head. And then you realize you're fortunate. So, and I don't give up. So then you just keep pushing. And you know what it is? It's no different than our surgeries and our disease. You literally take one. I remember in 2018, I just got to put one foot in front of the other foot. That was my goal. When I'm on the mountain, it's the same thing. If you're going a big mountain, it's just one foot on another foot. Just focus on the next step, next step, next step. No different than post-op. It's the exact same process. And that's exactly what I apply when I'm doing the mountain. It's no different. Same thing with Rob or Charlotte or Jess.
That, and you know what? I could talk about this for forever, but we're coming up on our hours.
Yeah.
I think that is an absolute beautiful way to end this session. Because it is, you just said it, right? It's just taking that one step,
yeah.
You can apply it into everything that you do in your life.
Yeah.
Is there anything else that you would want our listeners to know? All right, I always ask this one thing. Right. If there was one thing that you would want to leave our listeners with, what would that be?
Never lose hope. Honest to goodness, my worst illness years, I never gave up hope, no matter how bad the bowel disease was. And then you have things like, hey, look, think about this. I was a punching bag in 2018. I never lost hope. So not only do you have the really bad Crohn's disease and you have another surgery to add on to, that was my 13th surgery at the time. And then I had flesh-eating disease and my lungs are full of blood clots. I never said, woe was me. I always kept a positive attitude of hope. There's still hope for recovery. Finding the formula for that is not always easy. I get it. But don't lose hope. I know with me, I always clung on to a shred of hope. I never completely felt defeated. You feel defeated, but never completely. So don't give up. And I know a lot of people, I always say to a lot of people, if I say to friends, if there's people who would have gone through what I went through, the way that they would have committed suicide or gone to some addiction to deal with it. You got to be strong, right? But the hope helps get you through that. Just cling to that hope. And it could be eternal, just you can't give that and keep fighting. There's always, because I think like I shouldn't be doing what I'm doing, but I am despite what I went through physically. So there's hope for you too, right? There's hope for you too. Just don't give up.
I love that. What a beautiful message. And, guys, if you are into extreme, like you've heard what he's doing, right? This is not, just taking a little hike with your friends in up a little hill. This is like extreme stuff, which I think is amazing. And I'm loving following your journey. And I can't wait to see you guys climb these mountains and
do great stories.
Yeah, I cannot
epic
wait
stories. Yeah.
Hear it and see it. If you're looking for Patrick, it's the Ostomy Athlete on Instagram. Yep, .com, but then you can also find you on Instagram and TikTok as well. I will put all of that information here in the show notes so you can get in touch with them, ask him questions, ask him advice, all those wonderful things, and go follow his journey because this is going to be fun to watch. So Patrick, thank you so much
you, LeeAnne,
for being here this week.
Yeah. Okay, take care. See you, everyone.
Thank you so much for joining us this week. If you enjoyed this podcast, get the behind the scenes at LeeAnneHayden.com/ostomy updates. And also, if you found this episode encouraging, please screenshot it and share it on Instagram. And don't forget to tag me and also the person who was on the episode with me. I occasionally will do special gifts for anyone who does do a screenshot and share it on Instagram or in your stories. Also, lastly, please go to Apple or Google, rate, review, and subscribe to this podcast to keep up with them every single week. I enjoy you guys. Thank you so much for being here.